Hi, this is Sarah Linger with PianoKeyFinders.com, and welcome to this video about tiny experiments. Tiny experiments were developed by a woman named Anne-Laure Le Cunff. She's a French woman who was born and educated in Paris and ended up working for Google when she was young. And at the age of 27, she decided that she'd had enough with Google. The job wasn't doing it for her anymore. So she goes back to France and she starts a healthcare startup. In the second round of the incubator that her healthcare tech startup was going, she decided that she didn't love this either. So she went back to school and got her PhD in neuroscience with an emphasis on education. And what she started doing is she created a community called Nest Labs, where her community, everybody is from different places and they're all running tiny experiments. Tiny experiments are where you set up a PACT, and a PACT is something that is I will insert action for insert duration. Keep in mind these are tiny experiments. And the word PACT stands for Purposeful, Actionable, Continuous, and Trackable. Okay, so purposeful, in the case of what we're doing here, the purpose of all of these tiny experiments is to become a better musician, period. That's the purpose. Actionable, 99.9% of the time when I run a tiny experiment, it's something that a student does, or more specifically, something that a student plays on the piano. Continuous, it's over a period of time. And trackable simply means, did I do it or did I not? So it's a yes/no question. The tiny experiments that I'm running a lot of these days mostly involve going around the circle of fifths, because I want all of my students from their very first lesson to be comfortable with everything on the keyboard, black keys, white keys, understanding their names, and I want them to get in their ear the sounds that are associated with going around the circle of fifths, because that's how Western music is organized. Actually, it's how the majority of world music is organized too, even though it might not be defined that way. So the tiny experiments that I run would be something like, I'm going to play a 3-note scale around the circle of fifths as my warm-up every day for 7 days. And that's what I end up giving students as an assignment. Now, you keep track of it, so you write down each day that you did it, and then you make observations. At the end of the tiny experiment, you evaluate what you did with a plus minus next chart, where you look at what worked, you look at what you didn't do or what didn't work, and then you decide what you're going to do next. One of the things I really love about the whole idea of tiny experiments isn't just these small experiments that you're doing, but it's the keeping track of what you're doing and then analyzing what worked and what didn't. Because in the past, I have written dissertations, it seems like, on the assignments that what my students are supposed to do. And then they come back to the lesson, and even though I basically wrote them a book, they haven't even opened their assignment book. And so then you have to wonder what happened and why they didn't do it, but that's an awkward question. Right here, the expectation is when you come back to your next lesson, we're going to be talking about what you did and what worked and what didn't. So at the lesson after the experiment concludes, what you do is you, like I said, plus minus next. And in the next category, you have 3 options. You can persist, namely, this was a good experiment, but I'm not through with it, so I'm going to continue doing exactly what I'm doing. You can pause, like this was not fun, I didn't enjoy it, or you can pivot, you can do something completely differently, which also is an option. So when we go around the circle, my goal is, a lot of these going around the circle things take 5 minutes or less, but it's a warm-up, right? And my hope is that when you're doing your circle warm-up, going around all the keys, that you end up spending more than just 5 minutes. And because I design a lot of the going around the circle things using the same fingerings, what's happening is that students are getting a lot more muscle memory, because reading piano music and reading music is very, very visual, and vision is the sense that trumps all senses. So if you are reading and you don't have the skills in your fingers to play, then what happens is you are so consumed by the reading and the playing and processing and all that stuff at the same time that, number one, you get exhausted quickly, because visual stuff is really hard. It consumes a lot of brain resources, and you don't get enough playing to develop that muscle memory. So these going around the circle exercises allow one to get the muscle memory without having the burden of visual reading and processing. So when I start out with beginning students, from their first lesson, I use, among other things, a key name card. Now, we don't use this forever. My older and more experienced students don't need it at all, but in the beginning, it's really hard to remember the names of everything. Plus, on this one, I have all of the enharmonic spellings. So there's an F flat and an E sharp and a C flat and a B sharp. That's important because even in easier early music, you might see those things. And I want students to know that a flat simply means going over one key to the left, and a sharp is over one key to the right from a white key. And if you move 2 keys over, it's a double sharp, and 2 keys over, it's a double flat. But I want them to get that from the beginning, because then they don't get confused when the key signatures have more sharps and flats than there are black keys. So I line this up on the piano because that ensures that when they're at home, they're getting it right. Getting it right is important. And anything that you can do to avoid those kinds of confusions makes sense. The other card that I use for beginning students in this case is the 5-note minor and 5-note major scale card. And we're only doing 3-note scales at the beginning. So we're going 1, 2, flat 3, or 1, 2, 3. Now, all of the numbers in these cards are based on scale degrees on a major scale. So that's why the minor has a flat 3 here. Now, another way of looking at it, you can see that between the first note and the second note of a scale, I'm skipping a key, and the second note and the third, I'm skipping a key. So you could also think whole step, or skip a key to do this. Now, if I start this at the very beginning of the keys here, I can either move the card up by replacing the 1 with the 5, because we're going up 5 notes or going around the circle of fifths, or I can simply use one of the multitudes of circles of fifths that I have created over the years. And so I would start at C, and then I would go to G and D and A and E and B and so on. So if I'm starting on C, that's going up and down. If you start on the lowest C, you can go all the way around the circle of fifths, starting from here and making it all the way up to the top using a 5-note scale. Once you've done the major, you can do the same thing on the minor. You can also play melody and go around the circle of fifths on that melody. So for example, so that's on C. So if I was going to do it on G, you can do that all the way up and down the circle. If we were doing minor around the circle, I would start probably on A, and then I'd go to E, and then B, and so on. Again, on some of my circles of fifths, I have the minor on the inside. Others are just minor circles of fifths. You can find all of my variations of circles of fifths on the pianokeyfinder.com blog. The circles of fifths are free downloadable PDFs. Once you get around the circle doing the 3-note minor scale, then you can add a melody to that minor scale. So that's a D minor with the Ukrainian bell carol rhythm. The next one. So you can do that with the right hand, the left hand. You can do it loud, you can do it soft. There are so many variations that you can tuck into that little bit of muscle memory. So you can do 2-note slurs and 3-note slurs and legatos and staccatos and pianos and fortes, and you can do it fast or slow or with a metronome. But the thing is that these things are so small that they're easy to do, they're easy to master, and then the repetitiveness of going around the circle is very helpful. So this is just a video to get you started thinking about going around the circle of fifths and a few ideas for what a tiny experiment is. I will be continuing to run tiny experiments in my studios, and I will be sharing them on my blog and in my newsletter. So sign up for the newsletter when you get to the pianokeyfinders.com, and I will be releasing regular videos on different things that you can do going around the circle of fifths as tiny experiments. Thank you. This is Sarah Lingra with pianokeyfinders.com, and happy playing. Bye.